Welcome to Soundscape Books. You're listening to an exclusive audiobook recording of Midnight Red, a psychological thriller by Vivienne Black. Like and subscribe for more content. Enjoy.
Chapter 1. Contract in the Shadows. The contract waited on the glass table like a trap dressed in silk. 40 floors above Manhattan's chaos, the conference room smelled of polished chrome and quiet money. The document itself was pristine vellum, thick enough to stop a bullet, an artifact of permanence in a digital world. "The compensation is, as you can see, unprecedented," said the senior partner, a man whose face seemed carved from expensive marble. "And the access Mr. Rublev is offering, it is complete." Mila Jovanovic let her fingers trace the document's edge. This was it, the story that would crown her career or bury it. The knot in her stomach tightened as she reached for her phone. "Just one call," she said, stepping toward the window where Central Park spread below like a green scar across the concrete. David Chen's voice cut through the silence like a scalpel. "Mila, don't. I've seen the clause they forwarded. All communications mediated. Do you understand what that means?" "It means focus, David. Complete immersion. It means they'll edit your grocery lists. This isn't journalism, Mila, it's voluntary imprisonment. Gilded, sure, but still a cage." His desperation leaked through the phone's speaker. But ambition was a louder voice, drowning out his warnings. "It's the biography of the century," she murmured, watching a hawk circle between the towers. "I can handle Adrian Rublev." She ended the call before he could marshal another argument. The lawyers waited with professional patience as she returned to the table and lifted their fountain pen, a weapon disguised as an instrument of civilization. The scratch of nib against paper was the only sound as she signed her name. The ink dried black and irrevocable. The senior partner's lips curved upward, the first genuine expression she'd seen from him. "Excellent, Mr. Rublev eagerly awaits your arrival." The drive up the coast took 3 hours, each mile carrying her further from the world she knew. When the car finally stopped, Mila found herself before the chrysalis, not a house but an architectural declaration of war against the landscape. Raw concrete and impossible sheets of glass clung to the cliff face, while below the Pacific hammered the rocks with primal fury. The passenger door opened before she could reach for it. "Miss Jovanovic." The man standing there had been assembled from granite and discipline. Tall, broad, immaculate in his grey suit, he possessed the unsettling stillness of a predator at rest. "I am Elias Vance, head of security." No handshake, no welcome. He processed rather than greeted. The atrium beyond swallowed sound, its soaring glass walls revealing the ocean's violence, while containing its own perfect silence. Mila's heels clicked against polished stone, as Elias led her deeper into the structure. "Per your contract," he said, producing a velvet-lined case, "I must collect your personal devices." The phone and laptop felt heavier as she surrendered them, her last tethers to the outside world. In their place, Elias offered sealed boxes containing new equipment. "For your research and approved communications," he explained. Each word measured and final, the tour was surgical in its brevity. A gesture toward the glass tower rising from the structure's heart, the Panopticon study, Mr. Rublev's private domain. Another toward manicured grounds beyond steel and glass. The sculpted gardens. Daylight access only. Her suite was a study in expensive minimalism, white walls, chrome fixtures and a single window wall facing the endless Pacific. Elias paused at the threshold. "Dinner is at 8, Mr. Rublev will join you then?" The door closed with the soft finality of a coffin lid. Alone, Mila pressed her palm against the cool glass, and watched the waves devour themselves against the rocks. David's voice echoed in her memory. "Not a contract, a cage." The observation felt prophetic now. The dining room existed in that liminal space between shelter and exposure, walls of glass suspended over churning darkness. A single black marble table waited, set for two, its surface reflecting the ceiling's recessed lights like captured stars. He emerged from shadow with fluid grace, younger than his photographs suggested, dressed in charcoal wool that whispered of Savile Row. Adrian Rublev moved, as if the space had been designed around him. Ms. Jovanovich. His voice carried the warm resonance of aged whiskey. Forgive the formalities. Elias takes his duties seriously. A server materialized to pour wine, something pale and complex that caught the light like liquid crystal. Adrian settled across from her, his attention focused with surgical precision. Your investigation of the Atherton collapse, he began, swirling his glass. You saw the human mathematics behind the corporate facade, rare insight in your profession. The praise was a skilled thrust, aimed precisely at her professional pride. I follow where the story leads, she replied, trying to maintain the interview's direction. And what story do you hope to uncover here? The question was silk wrapped around steel, turning her methodology against her. Mila felt the conversation's center of gravity shift. She had come to dissect him. Instead, she found herself pinned beneath his microscope, each response catalogued and analyzed. The evening proceeded as a masterclass in conversational jiu-jitsu. Every question she posed deflected back toward her own motivations, fears, and ambitions. By dessert, she felt flayed open, while he remained an elegant enigma. This will prove fascinating, Adrian said finally, setting down his napkin with deliberate care. We begin tomorrow in my study. His smile was perfectly calibrated, warm enough to disarm, cold enough to unnerve. I am, as promised, an open book. The irony settled between them like a challenge. As Mila retreated to her suite, the ocean's roar seemed to grow louder, surrounding her glass prison with the sound of her own trapped pulse. She had signed the contract thinking herself the author of this story. Now she wondered who was really holding the pen. Chapter 2. The Rules of the Game. The Panopticon study existed as a monument to controlled transparency. Suspended within the estate's glass tower, the circular room offered a 360-degree view of sea and sky, while maintaining the clinical intimacy of an operating theater. Morning light poured through the curved walls, casting no shadows, a deliberate architectural choice that left nowhere to hide. Mila sat across from Adrian Rublev, her leather portfolio balanced on her knees like armor. The approved recording device waited between them on a table of polished obsidian, its red light a tiny cyclops eye. Her questions were arranged in careful hierarchy, biographical essentials first, then the deeper excavations that would reveal the man behind the myth. Your first major acquisition, she began, pen poised above legal pad. Aerodyne Systems. The financial press called it impossible for someone your age. What gave you the confidence to leverage so heavily against established players? Adrian steepled his fingers, but his gaze never left her face. He studied her with the detached curiosity of an entomologist examining a particularly interesting specimen. Tell me about Marcus Thorne, he said. The name landed like a physical blow. Her pen stuttered across the page, leaving an ink scar. I'm sorry? The Brussels investigation. Your primary source. His voice carried the gentle insistence of a confessor, a man who trusted you with everything, including his career. What happened to him after your article ran? Ice crystallized in Mila's veins. Marcus Thorne. The whistleblower whose life she'd inadvertently destroyed. The ghost that haunted every subsequent investigation. Few people knew that name. Fewer still understood its significance to her. That's not relevant to this project, she managed, isn't it? Adrian leaned forward slightly, his movement fluid as mercury. You're here to understand how I make decisions under pressure. But first, I must understand the instrument I'm working with. Your relationship to failure, to guilt, to the weight of unintended consequences. His smile was surgical in its precision. Every tool must be calibrated before use. For the next hour, he dissected her career with clinical thoroughness. Each question peeled back another layer of her professional identity, exposing the insecurities and moral compromises beneath. Her prepared interview became an involuntary confession, her careful research transformed into raw material for his own analysis. The notebook in her lap filled not with Adrian's secrets, but with her own, mapped out in his elegant handwriting as he took notes on her responses. When the session ended with a soft chime from his desk clock, Adrian rose with satisfaction. A productive beginning, he said, though they both knew who had been productive and who had been produced. We've established our baseline. Back in her suite, the silence felt weaponized. Mila sat before the estate-issued laptop, its corporate logo glowing like a judge's gavel. She needed to contact David, to send some signal that things were progressing abnormally. Her fingers moved carefully across the keys. David, first sessions more intensive than expected. Rublev's approach is uniquely analytical. The work requires total immersion, but progress is being made. We'll update as circumstances allow. She read it twice, satisfied that David would catch the subtext beneath her professional language. Her cursor hovered over send, then stopped. A small gray box materialized. Message pending review. Before she could process this violation, a discreet knock echoed from her door. Elias Vance stood in the hallway, holding a single sheet of paper with the mechanical precision of a court clerk. Ms. Jovanovic, he said, his tone suggesting this was routine administrative business. Your external communications require clarification for confidentiality purposes. I've suggested some refinements. He handed her the printout. Her carefully crafted message had been surgically altered. More intensive than expected, became thoroughly comprehensive. Uniquely analytical. Transformed into impressively methodical. Every hint of distress had been excised, leaving behind corporate speak that said nothing while appearing to say everything. These aren't clarifications, Mila said, the paper trembling slightly in her grip. This is censorship. This is protocol, Elias corrected with the patience of stone. For the project's integrity. Shall I approve the revised version? She understood now why her predecessors had vanished so completely, not just their bodies but their voices. Edited into silence before disappearing entirely. The cage wasn't just physical, it was linguistic, psychological, complete. Yes, she whispered, the word tasting like surrender. Desperation drove her to the archive of echoes that evening. If she couldn't communicate with the outside world, perhaps she could find answers in the catalogued past. The vast repository stretched through the estate's lower levels, a library of Adrian's achievements organized with museum-quality precision. She moved between towering shelves, seeking any crack in the perfect historical narrative. Family records, business correspondence, academic papers, all sanitized and indexed. Her frustration mounted until clumsiness provided opportunity. Reaching for a genealogical volume, she misjudged its weight. The book slipped, striking an adjacent box and sending its contents cascading across the marble floor. As she knelt to gather the scattered papers, her fingers found something that didn't belong. A modern fountain pen hidden among Victorian-era documents. The pen was beautiful, crafted from midnight blue resin with silver accents. It seemed too personal, too warm for Adrian's austere aesthetic. Following an instinct honed by years of investigative work, she twisted its barrel. The pen unscrewed at its center, revealing a hollow chamber. Inside, rolled tight as a prayer, was a slip of paper. With trembling hands, she unspooled the fragile message. Written in desperate script were two things, a name and a number. Julian Croft, 7. The name meant nothing to her immediately, but in the suffocating perfection of Adrian's domain, it felt like a scream echoing from the walls. Someone else had been here, had seen enough to hide a message, had hoped it might someday be found. As she carefully returned the pen to its hiding place, one truth crystallized with terrifying clarity: she was not Adrian's first biographer. The question now was whether she would be his last. That night, sleep eluded her like a fleeing suspect. She lay in the expensive bed, listening to the Pacific's endless assault on the cliffs below, and tried to decode the message she'd found. Julian Croft, 7. A name, and a number. A predecessor and a clue. In the morning she would return to the panopticon study for another session of psychological vivisection. She would sit in that glass fishbowl while Adrian continued his methodical dismantling of her professional identity. But now she had something he didn't know she possessed: the knowledge that someone else had played this game before her. And they had tried to leave breadcrumbs for whoever came next. The red eye of the security camera watched her from its corner perch, unblinking in the darkness. But cameras could only see surfaces. They couldn't detect the shift happening beneath her skin, the transformation from willing subject to unwilling participant, to something else entirely. Something more dangerous. A player who finally understood she was in a game. Chapter 3: The Accomplice. Dawn carved sharp angles through the panopticon study's curved walls. Mila stood before Adrian's desk, spine rigid as a blade, hands clasped behind her back. She had summoned him this time, a reversal that tasted of copper and electricity on her tongue. Adrian studied her over pyramided fingers, expecting the shattered remnants of last night's revelation. Instead, he found something that made his pulse quicken: perfect, manufactured composure. "You wished to see me." Not a question. A statement weighted with curiosity and the first threads of unease. Mila stepped closer, close enough to smell the bergamot in his morning tea. "I've been thinking about what you showed me, about Julian." She watched his pupils dilate, the involuntary betrayal of a predator scenting wounded prey. "You tear down worlds just to rebuild them," she continued, letting wonder creep into her voice like honey through gauze. "I was documenting surfaces my entire career. Shadows on cave walls. You," she paused, seeming to search for words grand enough. "You architect souls." The flattery struck home. Adrian's shoulders settled back into their throne room posture, his mouth curving with the satisfaction of a spider feeling vibrations on its web. "Understanding is transformation's first requirement," he murmured, rising to circle her like a curator examining a prized acquisition. "Stage 2 demands willing participation." "Then teach me." The words emerged breathless, desperate. "Show me how you work. Let me help you analyze the others, Julian, Annalise. I want to understand what you saw in them, that they couldn't see in themselves." Adrian paused mid-circle, caught between suspicion and the gravitational pull of his own ego. The request was perfect bait, acknowledging his genius while offering herself as collaborator rather than mere subject. Collaboration, he savored the word like aged wine. Yes. The data requires interpretation. He gestured toward the chessboard by the window, ivory and obsidian pieces arranged in eternal conflict. "But first, let's examine how thoroughly you've internalized my lessons about strategy." The following weeks dissolved into ritual. Morning games in the glass tower, where Mila learned to craft brilliant attacks that collapsed at the crucial moment. Adrian would dissect her failures with surgical precision, never noticing how her eyes tracked his methods, cataloging each psychological pressure point he revealed about himself. "Emotion clouds judgment," he observed after capturing her queen with a knight fork she'd walked directly into. "You still think with your heart." "I'm learning," she replied, fingering the fallen piece. The ivory was warm from handling, smooth as Adrian's practiced deceptions. Afternoons belonged to the greenhouse. Humidity pressed against the glass walls like trapped breath, while exotic blooms exhaled their narcotic perfumes. Adrian tended his collection with the devotion other men reserve for religions, misting delicate petals while expatiating on control. Every system requires maintenance, he said, adjusting a droplet's path down a waxy leaf, temperature, humidity, light, all calibrated to the 1000th degree. Like this estate, like the human psyche. Mila traced the intricate network of sensors and tubes that made this Eden possible. It's more than beautiful, it's alive. Responsive, like watching neurons fire in a vast brain. Pride swelled his chest. The nervous system analogy is apt. Every sensor feeds data to the central processing unit. Climate control, security, communications, all monitored from a single nexus. He gestured vaguely downward. The server room in the sub-basement, the true heart of this organism. From the doorway, Elias watched their exchange. His stillness had evolved from professional vigilance to something hungrier. A hound scenting wrongness but unable to identify its source. Mila's transformation troubled him in ways his training hadn't prepared him to articulate. Night belonged to preparation. In her suite's artificial twilight, Mila became a different kind of architect. Code flowed across her screen in precise geometries, a digital parasite designed to copy, encrypt, and hide. She embedded it deep in the metadata of an innocuous research document about Victorian garden design. Then came the most dangerous part, the message to David. Subject: Research clarification. I'm developing a fascinating section on the Rublev family's historical interest in rare orchidaceae cultivation. The primary sources are yielding unexpected insights. I believe I'll need to access the off-site botanical archive soon to verify some genealogical connections. Her finger hovered over the trackpad. The words looked scholarly, boring even. To anyone monitoring her communications, it would seem like the tedious pedantry of academic research. To David, who knew their private lexicon of coded distress signals, it was a flare shot into darkness. She clicked send. The response came 3 days later, buried in a forwarded article about climate change's impact on coastal ecosystems. Hidden in the metadata was a single line of confirmation that made her hands shake. Shepherd is watching. Storm coming. That evening, the local news carried an ominous forecast. A meteorologist pointed at satellite imagery showing a massive low-pressure system churning up the coast, its spiral arms reaching toward land like grasping fingers. The storm is expected to make landfall within 48 hours, the woman announced, her voice professionally calm while chaos swirled behind her. Residents should prepare for potential power outages and communication disruptions. Mila smiled at her reflection in the window. Even Adrian's perfect system had vulnerabilities. Nature, it seemed, was about to provide the ultimate distraction. The storm arrived like a living thing, hurling itself against the chrysalis with prehistoric fury. In the Panopticon study, rain sheeted down the curved walls in torrents that turned the outside world into an abstract watercolor of grays and blacks. Mila stood close enough to Adrian to feel the heat radiating from his body, close enough to smell the vanilla and cedar of his cologne cutting through the charged atmosphere. Her laptop sat on the credenza behind him, its screen dark except for a hairline thread of green light creeping across the bottom. Magnificent, she breathed, watching lightning fork across the sky. Even chaos bows to your will here. This place, it makes me understand what gods must feel like. Adrian's smile was pure predator satisfaction. He captured her hand in his, thumb stroking across her knuckles with possessive familiarity. Order imposed upon entropy. Will triumphing over circumstance. You're finally beginning to comprehend the scale of what we've built here. Thunder shook the glass and the lights flickered. In that strobing moment, Mila saw Elias silhouetted in the corridor beyond the frosted doors. His unease radiated through the barrier, like heat from a forge, duty warring with instinct, loyalty clashing with the certainty that something fundamental had shifted in the delicate ecosystem of his charger's world. Adrian noticed the shadow and his expression hardened. Without turning, he made a curt gesture of dismissal. "We are not to be disturbed, Elias." The silhouette lingered, caught between conflicting imperatives. Then, with visible reluctance, it melted back into the storm-tossed darkness of the house. As Adrian's attention returned to her with renewed intensity, Mila's peripheral vision caught the briefest flash of text on her laptop screen: "Transfer complete." The words appeared and vanished like lightning, leaving only the innocent glow of her research document. She met Adrian's predatory gaze with manufactured adoration, her heart hammering a victory march against her ribs. The trap was set. The king was exposed. All that remained was the final move. Chapter 4. Checkmate. The storm struck at nightfall like a fist against glass. Wind screamed through the coastal pines, while rain hammered the panopticon study's curved walls in sheets that blurred the world beyond into churning abstracts. Inside, candles flickered in crystal holders. Adrian's nod to theater during nature's tantrums. Mila stood close enough to feel his pulse through the silk of his shirt. Her laptop waited on the credenza, its screen reflecting the dancing flames, while hidden processes crawled toward completion. "Perfect," she murmured, watching lightning fracture the sky into electric veins. "Even this feels choreographed, as if the storm itself is performing for you." Adrian's laugh was low silk. "Chaos is simply order we haven't yet learned to conduct." His fingers found her wrist, circling it like a shackle disguised as jewelry. "You understand now. What others call destruction, we call renovation." Through the study's frosted doors, Elias materialized like a granite sentinel. The storm had triggered security protocols, sensors screaming about perimeter breaches that were only wind and debris. His jaw worked silently as he watched their intimate tableau, every instinct firing warnings his training couldn't decode. Adrian's eyes flicked to the distraction, irritation carving lines beside his mouth. "We are not to be disturbed," he called without turning, his voice sharp enough to cut crystal. Elias hesitated, loyalty warring with that wordless certainty that something fundamental had shifted in the ecosystem he'd sworn to protect. His shadow lingered for 3 heartbeats before dissolving back into the house's nervous system. The moment his guardian retreated, Mila caught the ghost of text on her laptop: "Upload complete." The words flashed and died, leaving only her research document glowing innocently in the candlelight. Victory tasted like copper pennies and lightning. Dawn arrived pale and wounded, filtered through glass, still streaked with the storm's violence. In the sculpted gardens, topiary soldiers stood at perfect attention despite the night's assault. Elias's groundskeepers had already erased nature's brief rebellion. Adrian found her by the obsidian koi pond, watching orange flames move through black water like living embers. Morning light caught the silver in his hair, transforming him into something almost ecclesiastical. "The transformation is complete," she said without preamble. Her voice carried new weight, not the tremulous instrument he'd tuned, but something forged in darker metals. He turned, eyebrows lifting at her tone. "Bold words." "True words." She faced him across the reflecting pool, her own image wavering between them. "You've remade me, but what use is a masterpiece locked in a vault? Your philosophy, your methods, they deserve immortality." Adrian's stillness became predatory. "Continue. Release me." The words fell like stones into water. "Let me carry your gospel into the world." Anonymous publications, underground movements, digital evangelism. A single convert creates converts. But a caged specimen proves nothing except the cage's strength. The hook sank deep. She watched it happen, saw his pupils dilate, his breath shallow, his fingers curl as if grasping invisible empires. The fantasy bloomed behind his eyes, his dark wisdom spreading like contagion. with him as its hidden god. An intriguing proposition, he said, tasting each syllable. Your apostolate would require careful orchestration. Of course, she stepped closer, close enough to see her reflection in his irises. I would be your instrument. Your secret voice in the wilderness. He smiled then, the expression of a spider feeling tremors on its web. Return to your room. I'll consider the parameters of your mission. 3 hours later, the panopticon study felt like a mausoleum. Adrian stood beside his chessboard, one hand resting on his obsidian king, as if drawing power from the carved stone. Through the walls a sound began, faint as a gnat's whine, then sharpening into the unmistakable wail of approaching sirens. Mila entered without permission, without deference. Her mask had dissolved completely, revealing the strategist beneath. There is no mission, Adrian. His smile froze, then cracked like ice under pressure. What did you say? The sirens multiplied, their chorus rising through the coastal quiet like wolves howling territory. You taught me to see the whole board, she said, voice cutting through the noise. But your vanity was a blindfold. While you obsessed over cornering my queen, you exposed your king to a discovered attack. Understanding dawned, ugly, inevitable, complete. The blood drained from his face as the implications cascaded. The stolen files, the fabricated conversion, the months of meticulous deception. Your greatest weakness wasn't cruelty, she continued, stepping closer as he stepped back. It was your need for an audience. Even God required witnesses to his creation. You couldn't resist showing off for your favorite specimen. The intellectual mask shattered. Raw, animal fury replaced it. Teeth bared, eyes wild, hands curled into claws. You worthless. He lunged across the chessboard, scattering pieces like teeth from a broken smile, but physics betrayed him, age betrayed him. His carefully maintained body, built for intimidation rather than violence, moved with the graceless desperation of a drowning man. He never reached her. The study's glass walls exploded inward with a sound like the world breaking. Federal agents in tactical gear swarmed through the crystalline rain, weapons raised, voices barking orders that echoed off the curved surfaces like the judgment of gods. Adrian Rublev, architect of souls, master of minds, king of his glass castle, collapsed to his knees among the chess pieces, his empire dissolving into sirens and shouted commands, and the inexorable weight of justice finally, impossibly, arriving. 6 months later, the city sprawled beyond Mila's window like a circuit board, all glittering connections and flowing current. Her apartment was modest, a deliberate choice, anonymity purchased with the advance from her book deal. On the wall, a corkboard displayed her victory in newsprint. Tech mogul's House of Horrors, the archive of echoes unveiled, victims, families seek justice. She didn't look at the clippings anymore. Her laptop screen glowed with a single document, the chrysalis. Not the biography of a great man, but the autopsy of a monster, written by the only witness who'd escaped with evidence. The cursor blinked patiently, while she studied her reflection in the dark window. The woman looking back was a stranger, harder angles, watchful eyes, mouth that had forgotten the easy smile she'd once worn like armor. This was the face of someone who'd sacrificed pieces of her soul to win a game she'd never asked to play. In the street below, an ambulance wailed past, its cry dopplering through the urban canyon. Her jaw locked involuntarily, muscle memory from a night when sirens meant salvation rather than just another emergency in an indifferent city. She breathed through the reaction, counting seconds until the sound faded. Then she turned back to the screen, placed her fingers on the keys and continued writing her way back to whoever she was supposed to be now. The story was almost finished. Soon, she could begin the harder work of writing herself back into existence. Chapter 5, Metamorphosis. 6 months later. The city breathed different air. Chicago's autumn wind carried the scent of dead leaves and distant steel mills through the cracked window of Mila's third-floor walk-up. She'd chosen the apartment for its anonymity. A forgettable box in a forgettable building where neighbors minded their own catastrophes. Her reflection in the laptop screen showed a stranger's face superimposed over the document title, The Chrysalis. Not the biography she'd set out to write, but an autopsy. A dissection of a monster performed by the only witness who'd crawled out alive, she typed. He collected broken things and called it art. What he never understood was that some breaks create new geometries. Harder angles, sharper edges. He thought he was crafting a disciple. Instead, he forged his own executioner. The cursor blinked, patient as a heartbeat. Around her, the apartment's sparse furnishings told the story of someone who'd learned not to accumulate attachments. A fold-out table. A second-hand chair. A single mug for coffee she drank black, because cream required planning for expiration dates. On the wall beside her desk, a corkboard displayed the anatomy of justice. Newspaper clippings yellowed at the edges. Each headline a small victory that felt nothing like triumph. Rublev sentenced to life without parole. Estate sold to compensate victims, families. The Chrysalis to become Memorial Park. She didn't read them anymore. Couldn't. Each article was a mirror, reflecting the pieces of herself she'd traded away, her ability to trust first impressions, to sleep through the night, to exist in the world without cataloging exits, and analyzing power dynamics in every conversation. The advance check from Knopf sat uncashed in her desk drawer, not from any moral qualm, but from practical paralysis. Money meant decisions. Decisions meant engaging with a future she wasn't sure she wanted to inhabit. Her phone buzzed against the table, a text from David, asking about lunch next week, their monthly ritual of checking in without acknowledging what they were checking for. She developed a talent for deflecting his concern with professional updates and questions about his own work, maintaining the fiction that she was healing, rather than simply functioning. She typed back, busy with revisions. Rain check? The lie came easier than explaining that crowds made her hypervigilant, that restaurant conversations felt like performance anxiety, that she'd spent the last social dinner mentally mapping the locations of every knife on nearby tables. The city's night sounds provided a familiar lullaby. Distant sirens, car horns, the percussive rhythm of the L train carrying insomniacs through their private darknesses. Mila worked by lamplight, the yellow glow creating a circle of purpose in her studio apartment's practiced emptiness. Chapter 12 was Fighting Her, the section where she had to describe the morning she'd realized Adrian was studying her, studying him. How to convey the metallic taste of fear mixed with the electric thrill of understanding that she was playing a game within a game within a game. The prey became predator the moment it recognized the hunter's patterns, she wrote, then deleted the line. Too clean. Too literary. The truth was messier. Weeks of careful observation punctuated by moments of genuine terror, when she'd wondered if her performance was convincing enough, if he could see through her manufactured devotion to the calculation beneath. A siren wailed in the street below, growing closer. Her hands froze above the keyboard, muscle memory flooding her nervous system with adrenaline. The sound crested, an ambulance, not police, then faded toward whatever emergency claimed the night. She counted her breaths. 1, 2, 3. By 15, the phantom panic had receded, leaving only the familiar exhaustion that followed these episodes. Dr. Ramirez called them trauma echoes, her nervous system still attuned to frequencies that had once meant salvation or destruction. The therapist meant well, suggesting techniques for reintegration and processing that felt like asking someone to reassemble a shattered vase and expect it to hold water again. Some things, once broken, served different purposes. On Thursday mornings, she visited the FBI field office in the Loop. Not officially required anymore. The trial was over, Adrian sentenced. Justice served with the mechanical efficiency of institutional procedure. But Agent Martinez had made the invitation standing, recognizing something in her careful composure that spoke to ongoing need. "How's the book coming?" Martinez asked, sliding a cup of coffee across the conference table. The FBI's brew could strip paint, but its consistency was oddly comforting. Almost finished. Mila wrapped her hands around the cup, feeling the heat penetrate her perpetually cold fingers. The publisher wants to rush it to market, capitalize on the trial coverage. And you? The question hung between them, freighted with subtext. Martinez had interviewed dozens of victims over her career, knew the difference between those who'd found closure and those still orbiting their trauma like satellites around a dead star. I want it to be accurate, Mila said carefully. The other victims, families deserve that. They deserve to know what happened in that place wasn't their fault, wasn't something they could have prevented. What she didn't say, that writing was the only activity that made her feel purposeful rather than simply persistent. That each chapter was an exorcism, each paragraph a small act of reclamation. Martinez nodded, understanding the spaces between words. The families appreciate what you're doing. Mrs. Croft especially, Julian's mother, she wanted me to tell you that. Julian, the man whose hidden message had led her to the archive, whose voice on the cassette player had guided her toward the truth. She'd never met him, but his ghost felt more present than most living people she encountered. Is she? Mila began, then stopped. Asking about other people's healing felt like admitting to her own wounds. She's seeing someone, a therapist who specializes in complicated grief. Says it helps to know he fought back, even at the end. Says it helps to know someone heard his voice. That evening, Mila returned to her apartment, as the city lights began their nightly transformation from utility to beauty. Her reflection in the window had become familiar. The sharp angles of weight loss, the hypervigilant set of her shoulders, the mouth that had forgotten how to relax into genuine expression. She opened her laptop and read the day's work. The butterfly that emerges from its chrysalis is not the same creature that entered. The process dissolves the caterpillar completely, every cell, every structure, every memory of crawling. What emerges is built from the soup of dissolution, arranged according to genetic instructions written in a language older than consciousness. I am not who I was before I entered Adrian Rublev's world. That woman was dissolved, processed, reformed according to patterns I'm still learning to read. But unlike the butterfly, I remember being the caterpillar. I remember choosing dissolution. And I remember deciding what to become in the aftermath. She saved the document and closed the laptop. Tomorrow she would write the epilogue, the final accounting of what had been lost and what, surprisingly, had been found in the ruins. Outside her window, the city continued its ancient work of sheltering strangers, each light a story of survival or surrender. Mila turned away from her reflection and prepared for another night of dreams that felt like documentary footage, vivid and factual and completely inescapable. Somewhere in the building, a neighbor was playing jazz, trumpet lines that curved and fell like smoke, like conversation, like the possibility that broken things might still make music. She listened until sleep finally claimed her, the sound weaving itself into dreams, where she was both predator and prey, both the architect and the structure, both the question and its own impossible answer. In the morning, she would finish the book. After that, the harder work of discovering what remained.
Thank you for listening to this Soundscape Books recording. We hope you enjoyed it. Please subscribe so you don't miss our new releases. Goodbye for now.